So the challenge we have in the industry is we all know it's quite chaotic with regards to information and data. And, you know, the construction sector or the built environment generates vast amounts of data, yet 95% of that goes unused, which obviously leads to inefficiencies, increased costs, safety risks, and missed opportunities for innovation. And as the industry faces growing demands for sustainability, digital transformation, and regulatory compliance, the need for better information management has never been more urgent. And, you know, there's some stats here. You know, only 23% of UK industrial organisations consider their data ready for analytics. And, you know, we only use 27% of the data for decision making. But quite astonishingly, poor data quality adds 2.5 billion a year across the UK on infrastructure projects. So that's huge. And then we have a massive issue in regards to the education side as well. So we're really missing a trick here, you know, and I've talked many times about information being a valuable asset in its own right, but for some reason we're just not recognising that nor exploiting it. So we've got a battle on our hands really to get that message out there. So in the past, back in 2016, we had the BIM Level 2 mandates. Then this was restated within the TIP roadmap to 2030. However, there was an issue with the mandate. So it wasn't formally mandated. It only applied to centrally procured public sector projects. It didn't cover all phases of built and managed environments. The value and benefits weren't clearly articulated. It didn't help individual organisations or users, and much of the industry is very much still in early phases of digital adoption. You know, the built environment is very vast in terms of maturity. On one end, you've got those at the start of the journey, and then at another, you've got those looking at, you know, things that are for the future. So it's quite broad in terms of that scope. So given this, how do we help guide the sector in the same sort of direction? So this is where we have the Information Management Initiative, which is a refresh of the mandate, but with a completely different approach. So it doesn't just throw a mandate out to the sector and says, get on with it. It's about working with organisations, joining things up and removing complexity. So the Information Management Initiative, or the IMI, is led by NIMA in partnership with the CLC. And it's a national programme designed to transform how the UK built environment sector manages information. And it builds upon the UK's leadership after BIM and aims to embed structured, secure and interoperable data practices across the life cycle of built and natural assets. So the first thing to remember about the IMI is there's three main features. So the first is a call to action for all organisations. Then there is a sector-wide directive that an organisation uses to assess its own maturity. And then it's down to the individual organisations to create their own internal mandates based upon their own maturity and their ambition. So it's about working with organisations and giving them a connected set of foundations on which to work in. And this can be any organisation, so it doesn't matter if it's public, private, small, large. You know, it's about all organisations involved in the built environment. So from, you know, lawyers, regulators, insurers, land valuers to asset owners and engineers. We all create and use and share information in relation to the whole life of built and managed assets. An organisation sign up because they recognise that information is a business asset and it will benefit them. We need to unite to build a common set of information foundations. And the IMI respects that all organisations are different and on their own journeys with regards to information management, and they perhaps have their own perspective on information as well. So this isn't a blanket mandate or approach. We have to factor in those differences. So an organisation signs up to the IMI. What's next? So once they sign up, they're invited to take part in this 4-step process. So the first step is around onboarding, and this is about the training on the basics of information management. The second step is around planning and mobilisation. So this is understanding where your organisation sits in relation to the IMI sector-wide directive, and it's about setting a target to where you want to go and how to achieve that. And then step 3 and 4 is around that organisational mandate. So it's about preparing the mandate using overarching rules, and then it's about implementing the mandate using specific rules related to the IMI framework. So the IMI framework, which you may have already heard of and you might use on a daily basis, it used to be called the UK BIM framework, and this is where we have the relevant standards and all the free guidance that's been developed over the years with regards to ISO 19650. So we're going to build it upon those rules. But to deliver that IMI process, we have to we've broken it down into a series of projects. And the first bucket of projects we've called the organisational projects, and these represent each of the 4 steps that I've just mentioned. So we have project 1, which is in relation to step 1, and this is the IMI Foundations training. So this is very much understanding the why, what, when and who of information management. And part of that there is a small training package, and we're also developing an animation at the moment in regards to that. So that's just to get people on board. Step 2 is then related to project 2, which is the IMI maturity and benefits framework. So this is going to be a tool that we're developing which helps organisations understand where they are now in terms of the maturity and sets the target as to where they want to be and how to reach that. And then that sets the organisation up ready for them to look at the internal mandate. And for this, this relates to project 3, which is the IMI mandate methodology. And this is being led by Shahida Rajabadeen and Andy Bootle. And for that, we're going to provide methodologies that organisations can use in terms of getting their organisational level mandate ready so people can commit to it, and then actually then how that's implemented within an organization and how you can roll it out, train, monitor and have those improvement cycles. So that's all well and good, but organizations, we don't operate in silos in the built environment. We all have to work together. So one organisation has to work with another organisation on projects, all in different combinations. And for this, we need to be able to share information and data. And the challenge around this is not the lack of doing, but the lack of alignment. So much money is wasted across organisations, projects, initiatives every day because we're all trying to solve the same problems. And all this is doing is spreading the funding and resources out thinner and thinner and diluting the impact. And it's starting to get out of hand. So what we need to do is rein that in and solve it once and solve it well and make sure it all fits together in a bigger picture. And for this, we need the second bucket of projects. So these are the technical projects, and this is to develop a standard information approach which builds upon the existing IMI framework to establish information management foundations across the entire sector. So I don't know about you, but there is so much out there at the moment and it's overwhelming. We've got things like ETIM, GS1, UNICLAS, IFC, information requirements, data dictionaries, and then we'll put in AI on top of this. It's how does all this fit together? So we almost need an implementation layer within this, sitting upon all that work of the standards and the guidance to bring it together with practical tools and to hide that complexity to form that standard information approach. And some of this work has already started with PAS 1958, which is due to come out either the end of this month or early next month, where we started to bring together 45 standards with regards to information management and data management across the built environment to see can they actually fit together. Is there an overall framework and a pattern that we need to work to? So we can start to build upon this, but it's all about hiding that complexity of the detail as well. So for this, we've created this basic framework, and it's based around people, context, process, data and technology, which are the 5 components in PAS 1958, but also are the 5 components used in the maturity and benefits tool as well. So at the top, we've got the people side, which is the organisational part of that, and that is supported by those 3 projects that I talked about earlier. And then we have the context. So information management is very context dependent, what is happening in the real world. And that then starts to inform the information purposes, which identifies the information specification, which are the information requirements. And that then starts to inform the information that's actually produced. Now, if the information specification is almost like the questions with regards to information, then information sources provide the actual data with regards to those questions. And for this, you've got sectors like manufacturing sector, which actually provide a lot of the data that we need in the built environment. And for that all to work, that needs to be underpinned by consistent syntax and semantics. Otherwise, we're all talking different languages. And then we have technology. So this is where then technology then plugs into this system. It's not technology led. It's independent of technology. Now, to build this framework, we split it down into a series of technical projects. And so I'll just briefly go through each of these projects. So the first project is purpose methodology. So creating an actual methodology for working through in terms of defining purpose. Now, purpose is one of those things across the sector that we're really not very good at the moment. Why is information needed? Then the second one is around use cases. So creating standard sets of use cases. And also having standard sets of information requirements. So for this, we're going to be focusing on our first use case, which is insurance, which is one that isn't typically thought about with regards to the built environment, but it's very important. Then we have the third one, which is around the information requirements, which obviously feeds into number 2, but it's understanding how we start to create modularized information requirements and also spreadsheet representations of them as well. Then we have number 4, which is the taxonomy builder, and this one's the one that's closest to my heart. For me, one of the most, the biggest issue we have with regards to information management is around terms and definitions. We all call things different things and have different meanings, and we need to rethink the approach to this. So it isn't just a case of mapping one term to another. That doesn't work. So what do we need to do to address that? Then number 5 is model sync. So this is really looking at the object-orientated approach to information models, specifically during the operational phase, to make sure that the asset information model is kept in sync with the physical asset. Then number 6 is a schema alignment. So we have the schemas like IFC, but we also have OSCAR, we have BRIC. So how do those schemas come together? Because not one schema does everything. Then we have 7, which is the technology code of practice. So that's creating a set of rules which technology providers can adhere to plug into this. And then we have 8, which is the manufacturer's information collaboration. So this is almost like a bridge between the built environment and then what is happening in terms of the manufacturing sector. And I'll just talk about that in a minute. And regards to these projects as well, because Building Smart UK and Ireland is also part of nima, the projects that we're working with in Bazooki actually also contribute to these projects as well. So it's, again, all working to the same outcomes and the same bigger picture. So this is how those projects align to that framework that I just talked about. And just to bring up 2 additional projects which sit out the scope of this. So we have the Manufacturers Information Hub, which is being led by Alex Small of Tata Steel, and this is basically getting all the manufacturers together and again collaborating on that side. So we're going to be working closely with the Manufacturers Information Hub, and then we have Project Indigo as well, which is almost like more of an R&D project and looking further into the future and really looking at how we can start to use semantic modelling and ontologies and knowledge graphs to start to really look at knowledge representation. So one of the things with regards to the IMI is it's understanding that a lot of this work is underway and some of it is existing work that we can make use of, but some of it will be new and we need funding for. But just imagine all the money that gets spent sorting this out. It could be sorted once and for all across the entire sector for a fraction of the cost. So the time to take action is now. We do have a lot of what is needed. There is growing appetite for this, and I think it might be one of our last opportunities, to remain in control of our own destiny and to establish those rules. So by its very nature, information hates being constrained by silos. It needs to connect. And other sectors have worked together to solve aspects of this. We see it in finance, we see it in health. So we really need to follow suit and do the same. So it's about bringing together the right people, the right knowledge, skills, ideas, and passion from the different initiatives. So I keep saying, joking, it's like the Avengers, bringing people together with those right skills. But it's also looking at how we connect as a whole to other initiatives like the Manufacturers Information Hub, but also how we fit into a much wider vision as well. So any organisation can join and to register any interest, then please email us at info@wearenima.im. And there's already been strong interest from organisations wanting to join, and these are some of the organisations that have already signed.